Hello again, everyone. Todd Michael Putnam here from Creative Adventure Tables, bringing you another adventure table idea. And this is the Curse of Godstone Temple. The Curse of Godstone Temple. This is the first adventure that I ran using the quick start information from the new RPG Shadow Dark. Shadow Dark comes from the Arcane Library. It's currently on Kickstarter right now. It's going crazy. They've already kicked in, I think, over $850 something thousand dollars of a $10,000 Kickstarter. I backed it myself, and I was very interested in it. So I decided to ask my players if that instead of running a 5th edition game, they'd like to do a one-off with the Shadow Dark. And they all said yes, they'd be interested in it. 2 people couldn't make it, but everybody else could. And they all had a blast, so much so that without me prompting them, they said that they would be interested in running Shadow Dark in the future over 5th edition. I'm not a 5e hater. I've been running it for years. I think it's a great system. I've had my own changes and stuff to it with my creatures and catacombs, because there's always things that I wanted to make more grimdark and more challenging with it. But not a hater of Wizards of the Coast or 5e or anything like that. But I'd always been looking for a better system to address what I felt were some underwhelming aspects of 5e as far as telling stories and keeping the balance of power and not getting too much power creep and stuff. And Shadow Dark has done a fantastic job of that. So I backed it, and my players liked it. As far as the story of this is concerned, so there was an ancient temple called Godstone, housed by the priests of the divines in the Shadow Dark type universe, and which you can read about if you download their quick start thing for free. And anyways, this temple had been filled with high priests of the various gods of law, chaos, and neutrality. But ages ago, some curse came over and shut the entire temple down and locked it away so that no one could go in or out again. The giant stone doors closed, and no one heard from any of the priests inside the temple again. Couldn't figure out what was going on, and so it remained shut and cursed. People believed cursed by the gods themselves. And an earthquake happened in the recent history, and the players found out about it, that it had actually broke open the giant stone doors for Godstone Temple, and so the players were able to go inside and explore, looking for the vast wealth of the priests. And there's a set of stairs that are coming down into the first top room. The top of the temple itself was all laid bare, but there were stairs going down, and that's where the adventure takes place, in the catacombs underneath the temple. The first thing they see is there was a library with several books that they could read about, which I won't go over here, but basically just explaining some of the history of the temple, that there was a civil war that was going on between the clerics of law and chaos, even though they all worshiped the gods together. And there was definitely some strife that was happening. And then when they step into this section here, there's these gargoyles that are there, and there's all signs of damage from the earthquake that happened. There's a body of a former adventurer that didn't make it, who that's how the players ended up learning about it, is that was the son of somebody else who went inside and never came back out again, and that man had told the players about it. And what had killed him was, of course, this big rat swarm. And so when the players get into this one area, the swarm comes out again looking for more food and attack the players. Nobody died. They all managed to take down the rat swarm, and that worked out great. And there was a little bit of treasure here. There was a scroll that had the spell Holy Weapon on it that allowed them to attack with one weapon at +1 to hit and +1 to damage. Very low-level adventure. It's for first levels. And then the players came to this section over here where there's this bridge. And by the way, all of this was covered with black poster board and towels and stuff like that. So only as the players would get to an area, I would remove the poster board from there, and then they could see it. And that's the way I do it with all my campaigns. So and for this, I just had big black cloth that I had covered over so they couldn't see what was going on. And they got to this area here, which was a bridge. And that bridge has obviously been partially broken by the earthquake itself. And so the players had to make jumps to go across. I made it extremely easy. There was a chance they would drop their torch if they rolled under it, but only with a nat 1 would they fall. One of the players actually did, in fact, roll a nat 1, and so they lost the first character as they fell to their death down the bottomless pit below. And so they lost their first of 6 characters. And then they had to hurry along because there was a sound of like flapping wings from out of this long dark chasm. And so they hurried into this section here. And when they got there, there was a flock of bats came in through and started attacking them, attracted by the light. Meanwhile, the thief went in and there was a locked cage there, and he was able to jimmy the locks and pull it out, and there was some various treasure and stuff in there and some armor and weapons. None of it magical, but just upgrades to what they had. And by the way, I used these things here. It's from McCreany or something like that. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, and I'll have a link to it in the bottom of the in the description. For these torches here, I use them, little LED torches you put underneath. In Shadow Dark, nobody has dark vision or infravision or anything like that, so darkness matters. If all the lights go out, then the players are basically at disadvantage for everything, and so keeping those torches burning is a huge important thing, which was hence why I was talking about over here when they're trying to cross this broken bridge. They would jump, and if they rolled too low, there's a chance they could drop their torch, and that would expend one of their resources or more, depending on how many might have dropped their torches. So, and that's how I would use to designate which characters had the torches. Whenever they said, I would just put them on there, and then there's a real world 1 hour timer that goes on in Shadow Dark for how long a torch can last or how long a light spell lasts. So just mark it off and get them going. But that's a great visual indicator, obviously, of who has torches and how long they're going to last for. So they got some items and equipment, and they came into this section over here, and there were some doors that were melted off. The doors themselves were okay, but the hinges had been melted off. They couldn't figure out why until they got into this room here, and there was a huge gelatinous cube which started chasing them back. The wizard got paralyzed and took some damage, but they picked him up and ran as fast as they could. The gelatinous cube did follow them, and they made their jumps over back to the center span of the bridge, and the gelatinous cube followed him and then just fell off to its demise. And so rather than fight the gelatinous cube directly, which could very well have been fatal for the party, they were able to run to safety and then just make the jump back over, and they were able to bring their wizard back to life. And so then they brought them into this room here, which was basically a worship chamber for the divines, and they just had to basically sacrifice a certain amount of gold that they had found, or gems or jewelry, and depending on how much they sacrificed, they would either get a boon or a bane from the gods themselves. They weren't aware of that. They just knew that they needed to sacrifice because there were 2 clerics with them, and this door on the other side here was like magically locked. They couldn't get past it, and the priests who were in the party realized that they had to make the sacrifice. They did, but they all sacrificed low. They went on the cheap, and so their next attack rolls were all at disadvantage. Bad choice for them. They did survive, but it wasn't. They weren't actually attacked in this particular one. If they had taken too long to make the decision, they were going to have some very weak, shadowy creatures come out and attack them. But the players were quick in deciding to go ahead and to make their sacrifices. The door opened. Down they went. They came down a couple of sets of stairs, and they came to this area here with a glowing pool. And it was also filled with a number of undead priests. The high priests from ages ago had been somehow cursed by the gods to being undead. And so they were roaming around, and the heroes had to go ahead and dispatch them, which they were able to do. And then they were able to go ahead and drink from this fountain and restore some of their health and cure some of their ailments that they had going on. And then they came first to this area here, which was across another broken open room with a chasm. But rather than do that, they decided to sneak back this way and head through the broken walls that were here from the earthquake. There were, by the way, some treasures and stuff that they were able to grab in this room. There was 3 treasure chests, I believe. There was one there, and there was one here, And then I had another one that wasn't a treasure chest, but just a pile of gold and stuff there. They were able to get some treasure, which got them some XP. And then they went through these broken holes in the walls to basically a large open cavern. And in this cavern, there was a rat's nest filled with all kinds of rats and stuff. There were giant rats, but the rats themselves did not attack the players. They just kind of milled around nervously and whatnot. But they noticed in the rat's nest that there were several items of great value, clearly probably taken by the rats from this temple over the ages. So there was a magic sword, and there was an arcane spell book, and there was a magical staff, and I believe there was a set of leather armor. And so they were taking their time but it was all stuck inside of the rat's nest. Like, it wasn't like just pull it out. That they had to unwind it from everything. And so it took several rounds. And while they were doing that, this giant purple worm came up, which is way, way over the level of the players. Their players are level 1. Obviously, they're not going to be able to fight a purple worm. But the purple worm apparently felt the vibrations or whatever, and maybe thought the players were giant rats or something, but came up and just starts randomly chomping. Now, the purple worm is blind. It doesn't have any actual eyes or anything like that. So it chomped at random, depending on the number of players that were around it, and the number of rats that were there. I rolled the d20. And if it rolled equal to a number of the players, it would make a random attack at the players. Otherwise, it would attack and kill one of the rats to eat that. But in the meantime, and the players certainly could have run at any time, but they decided to risk it, knowing that they could potentially face certain death if that thing ever actually bit them. One player did get bitten, but the number was low enough that he barely survived. The rest of them were either they attacked the rats, and I think one was a miss by it. But the players decided to stick it out for several rounds until they got all the magic items, and then hauled butt as fast as they could back into this room. And that purple worm describes why all of a sudden there were earthquakes going on, because he's clearly been burrowing around underneath the temple, causing all kinds of destabilization. And so that's where the earthquakes came from, and that's why the temple got reopened after all those ages anyways. And then last but not least, now that they've been armed with a magic sword and magic, leather armor and a staff that heals and stuff, they jounced their way across this large chasm. There were some sting bats, which are basically same thing as like sturges in Dungeons and Dragons. There were some sting bats that were crossed here. They were able to make it past them. And finally, they go into the final chamber, which was occupied only by a burning, charred skeleton, which was the former high priest himself, who had made arrogant demands of the gods of chaos in order to allow him to rule supreme. And he claimed that he was, eternally faithful to the gods of chaos. So in their kind of twisted sense of justice, the gods of chaos went ahead and made him immortal as an undead, but also killed everybody else off in the temple, turning them into undead and trapping him in here forever. He sort of got his wish, but certainly not the way that he wanted it. He was, of course, filled with much hatred for the living, and so he immediately began attacking the players, and the players could do no damage to them, but instead there was this floating idol, artifact that the players had to destroy first. It's a black obelisk with like glowing red runes on it. I can spin it around here. There we go. It's actually a magnetic levitation device with some Dwarven Forge LED stuff put on top of it, but that always makes for a great magical thing to be put there. And the players had to destroy that first, and once that was destroyed, that's what made the former high priest, who is now undead, that made him vulnerable, and the players were able to kill him, and that gave them enough experience to make it to level 2. So that was the adventure for the Cursed Temple of Godstone. There it is. Thanks for watching. Greatly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content and you want to see more of what we're doing here. Looks like we're probably going to be doing some more Shadow Dark in the future. We all had a blast running it, so give that a try. Whatever system you prefer, obviously play whatever makes you and your group happy. But we were all very pleasantly surprised with how smooth and simple the system ran and how enjoyable it was. So again, it all depends on your group play style, but if you are open to looking for something that's like kind of halfway between OSR and 5e, then that might be something worth taking a look at. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys next adventure. Take care. Bye.